Get a rug. 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 Hey, get a rug. 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 Get a I'll get a rug. You get a rug, get a rug. Get a rug, get a rug.
Get all the rugs.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Friends, strangers across the world and behind the screen. Welcome to An Endless Dance, a live hangout listening session here at Tanztage, streaming from Festsaal at Sophiensaelle in Berlin. We are gathering here for an endless dance to talk about the social role of queer parties and club culture collectives as spaces for togetherness, conviviality, and mutual aid around and beyond the dance floor. For queer, trans, and BIPOC communities, queer festivities have always been a place of resilience, regeneration, and resistance. Since the beginning of the pandemic, however, the dancing and gathering has stopped for the most part, and many people have been pushed into domestic isolation, surrounded by a heightened sense of anxiety and emotional distress. With no certain resolution in sight to the current crisis, we are faced with a gap in the social role these spaces once served. Tonight, we will talk with members of various queer feminist club culture collectives about their efforts and necessity to keep alive the restorative and transformative power of dance, and how practice it in safer ways. The conversation will last about 1 hour 30, and it will be followed by a 2-hour listening session from the series Infinity Rug. There is also a chat room in the stream. We won't be able to see the chat or respond, but you can exchange thoughts with other viewers, and it will be moderated by some members of Tanztage. To use the chat, expand the video on Vimeo, not on the Sophiensaelle website. The series Infinity Rug was initiated during the quarantine in the form of a small home listening gathering, weaving various elements of ambient and deep mind music, spoken word, ceremonial practices of somatic and sonic healing. Rugs provided the intimate comfort of home, a place for resting, loving, mourning, playing, meditating, sleeping. So bring a cozy rug, get comfortable, make some tea if you will, light some candles, and make sure you can listen properly. There will be voice and music. Let's get intimate tonight. If you are assisting with a group of people, make sure there is enough space and that you ventilate the room regularly. The participants here for an endless dance tonight are members of various collectives such as Climax, Dump, Lecken, Mina, Rabbit Hole, and Xeno Entities Network. Projects that share an affinity for queer feminist dance floors, electronic music, and community social action. We don't represent the totality of these collectives, and our work is part of a way broader, plural and expansive milieu of ravers, dancers, musicians, DJs, performers, activists, community, and party organizers. On the rug tonight, we have Eder Purcell from Lecken, Maria Scaroni from Lecken, Wanda Games, also from Lecken, Ruzbe Tazibi from Climax and Dump, and myself, Pedro Marum, from the collectives Mina, Rabbit Hole, and Xeno Entities Network. There is a person missing among us, on this stage and in our lives. We would like to honor the absence of Mariana Nobre Vieira, a member of Rabbit Hole and Lecken, a brilliant thinker and dancer of the Berlin and Lisbon dance scenes. We miss her voice and her contributions very much. We miss her generous dancing. Mariana will appear in some of the footage tonight, and our manifested vision for a state of rave will be listened tonight. Thanks for being with us in an endless dance.
Yeah, so I think something that brings us all together is that we're all part of different collectives that came together from a need to start organizing our own spaces and our own collectives around our own desires and our own needs, because we saw a lack, and not only in terms of representation, but more importantly, we saw a lack because most nightlife was organized by white cis men, and not surprisingly, not that it's a crime, but of course, it was organized around their desire and their pleasure. And of course, as long as they create the space, they organize the space, they create the rules, everything is from their perspective, and it gets even worse when they see everyone else, various queer positions and identities as ways of being, as sort of like an audience and a market, because then it becomes about like how they perceive our pleasure looks like. And of course, for us, the way to intervene was to start from the very core of how organization begins, how we work together, how we talk together, and start creating spaces that revolved around what we want and how we want to socialize and how we feel safe and how we resolve conflict and how we share pleasure among us in a way that feels open to as many of us as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, exactly what brings us here tonight is a certain idea or a certain sympathy for values that we feel that unite and represent queer rave culture or queer feminist raves. And collectives are definitely like an essential and vital part. Like all of us move and organize in collectives. We're not just the solo worker and gathering all the capital towards ourselves. We make sure that these projects and these ideas create capital and also agency that is redistributed among our community. I think this is an important and vital way of working for us. There's certain values that also come from anarchist traditions, such as equality, horizontality. Decision making is also split between all members. There is all opinions matter. We can have different positions and responsibilities, but ultimately we operate as in synchronicity, as a collective. And another thing that is also important among queer feminist parties is the pursuit for diversity and inclusion for different bodies and identities. Oftentimes, I mean, for me at least, going from a small village to Lisbon, I was also hoping to find a place where I would feel represented and I could meet like friends and my community, and I found that oftentimes hard. Most of the clubs and spaces were commercial, straight dominated spaces, and I guess that was also like the force that made us like gather and initiate like these events first at home, and eventually they ended up like happening in illegal spaces or in small bars and clubs. This diversity needs to also go beyond our group of friends. It's about understanding also what are the needs of a very plural community. The queer community it's pretty plural and diverse, and we want to make sure that it is accessible, be it by having affordable prices at the entrance, that the people working not only diverse lineups, but also the people working in the team, the production team, the team in the bar, making sure that we can accommodate all this diversity. One of the things that oftentimes I remember we would be criticized at Min is the fact that we had a price, for example, a price of entrance. We always had very small fees, and of course, if people would approach us saying that they could not afford, we would try to accommodate. But for us, it's also very important, like to have like, or it's difficult to have these events running free, because this is also our way to generate some revenue, and this revenue is what allows us also to create sensitive and work conditions where people are paid for their work with dignity. So we really aim to have like better work conditions, and yeah, there's other elements that for example, with Mina, now I'm talking about Mina, were pretty kind of changed the scenario. In Lisbon was one of them was like to have members of our team like doing the door policy rather than have like the typical straight male security, using very police-like tactics, like fear-mongering the people at the door. We wanted it to feel welcoming, and door policy, it's not about creating an altivity or exclusivity, it's also to make people understand what is that space before they get into that space.
And that's the thing that sets the mood for the space from the beginning, both in terms of like how the vibe of the space is, but also in terms of safety and consent and very important issues. Because if the first feeling that someone gets is that like, okay, I got past the first layer of defense of this fortress, and now I'm here despite the space, so I have to keep hiding, make sure I don't get in trouble, which of course creates a bad vibe and like a, I don't know, like a plethora of dangerous situations, from people hiding dangerous consumptions, medical emergencies, not reporting sexual abuse or harassment, and
Yeah.
that just, yeah, that's a big problem from the get-go. And like, if someone walking in feels like, okay, this is my space, then the whole relationship to everyone else present and also the organizers changes from the beginning and puts everything on the right track somehow.
Yeah. Just to add a small point to that, it's not just important in terms of hosting and visibility to have queers in position of decision-making power, but also to give them the power to decide then who gets in or how certain aspects of the party are structured, because that will then make sure that the door policy, for instance, is a queer feminist policy. It took us years to understand how to organize a feminist door policy at Lecken, and in the end, we actually learned a lot from Radiant Love, who applied a strategy of asking people at the door, of telling them this is a femme to the front space, and do you know what that means? And actually having a conversation, right? So it's, the queer feminist space is a kind of space for us by us, but ostensibly it's not just about identity, but also about politics. So other people are also welcome as long as they can get on board with certain values which are intrinsically political, and then you end up having these conversations which are essentially political conversations at the door, but they're necessary, and it's hugely important to put queers in positions of power.
Yeah, I felt like that was, for me, I learned a lot when Mina brought from Lisbon this idea of having an awareness team, which is like a group of people who are aware during the party, and they have some sort of necklace on so you can identify them, and this is the person that you go to if you have a problem, if you're uncomfortable, if you need help. And being part of these awareness teams, which are really big, maybe it's like 8 people a night, you get faced with different kind of problems, like, okay, how do we deal with harm reduction in the club? How do we deal with people feeling comfortable, and how do we host? And then I felt like you're learning to do it as a group, be accountable for the space that you're hosting, and people then start to be more active participants at a party rather than consuming a party, which I think if a party gets to a certain size, if you have a massive club, you can only be a consumer of that party. But if you have a smaller club and people are more visible, then you are able to be sort of more active in deciding how it works and how people feel in the space.
Yeah, and sometimes there's some criticism regarding harm reduction. We were very lucky because we came across with Cosmic Air, who has been doing harm reduction for a few years in Portuguese festivals. And a lot of the criticism that we would get is how harm reduction could come as a form of enabling substance abuse or consumptions. But it's more about also sharing or making people more literate about the substances that they're consuming, being alcohol or other forms of drugs, and also to make sure that people are doing it in a safer way. just like shying away from the fact that it's happening is not going to make it stop. It's more about like assuming that it's happening, and when we're creating this space, we also need to have a responsibility for that space and what happens in that space, and we want everyone to feel as comfortable as possible. So this also means by creating a raver's care corner where you have someone that is ready to help someone that might have a psychotic crisis, or walking around the space saying if someone needs to eat or to drink water, and that also is like a vital element. Like oftentimes in clubs, I would feel that the staff would see us like as enemies. Like you're just expelled. You're just put outside at the door if you're like really struggling. And it's like, it seems like the worst and most dangerous practice. It's about like owning it. Yeah, this is happening. There's risks being taken. How can we make sure that people are feeling welcome and are doing it in the safer ways possible?
Yeah, I also remembering, participation as a form of harm reduction somehow, or remembering like the different kind of ways you go in and out, participating into these festivities, these raves, and sometimes you don't have capacity, maybe because you happen to have a job for a little bit, or you're tired and you cannot afford this like loss or consumption or time is not available, And then people would appreciate the culture of awareness team, and then little by little they would make themselves available for it. So like I can maybe participate in the party by being an awareness team person, for instance, or when a lot of us are artists of different sort, and then you would keep an ear out, like, oh, I don't feel like coming, and people shying away because maybe the pressure of like partying hard was strong, and then you go, would you rather perform, and then they would, given that, you keep the feelers out to, so yeah, I think participation as a form of harm reduction also to stay connected, but yeah. And I think that this is also the difference a little bit, brings up this thing we mentioned in the last days, preparing about the difference between industry and community. So it's not so much about, hello, I'm a club, I have a performance program, I have queer people coming here, they're showcased, and we have an awareness, and like having kind of like the lineup of the right things to do down, but it comes from an emergent situation, and that's like curiosity, fascination, need, and like community coming up with it. So, and sometimes, I hosting these parties, sometimes I got confused because Berlin is such a, the club industry is so strong, and sometimes I felt a little bit resistant towards people not being sure if they were coming to consume yet another Berlin crazy party and expecting a certain service, or if they were, how they were belonging in there somehow. So again, this line between participation and consumption, and so accountability and demand is a very different vibe.
If I can just say one word on harm reduction, because I think it's important to mention it, that the conversation around harm reduction had to go a lot, had to expand a lot and go a lot deeper this year with the disappearance or the shutting down of the dance floor, because people continue to use, but at home under different circumstances, slightly different circumstances, and the conversation then and the attention to harm reduction, which is basically a body of knowledge that contradicts the standard medical approach to substance use, which is a disease model to say that substance use always ends in disease and the only solution to it is abstinence. So harm reduction is trying to think of an alternative to that, and to put the users in charge of their own using, and to treat them as autonomous, and to treat their pleasure as legitimate. So the conversation had to expand not just to know your dose, but also to explore yourself and understand what is your relation, why are you using, when are you using, and what purpose does this serve in your life, and helping people to set objectives and goals that are healthy for them, or that they are actually in charge of. And we had a rave length a platform that Pedro and a few others started earlier last year, where a series of talks happened, and we also tried to contribute by producing a little flyer from a book on harm reduction psychotherapy, which appeared in our zine, and very happy to announce that Manchak has decided to reprint it and to share it starting some point this year in their offices. But obviously this is not, this is just the first step, you know. It is unfortunately very sad to hear when friends go to appeal to counseling services at places like Schwulenberatung, and they're being told that their life problem can be reduced to a substance problem and that they cannot talk about anything else before they resolve their substance problem. And I think, yeah, we still have a long way to go working on the harm reduction front, because it is a very complex problem that cannot be dealt with just by awareness teams on the dance floor, and can sometimes cannot be resolved just by friends being good friends to each other.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like, I don't know, like, these are problems that also come from outside, you know, like, and this is why we always said that harm reduction cannot only be done in the club or in the party. And I think that's also why, you know, Lecken and Mina and so many other collectives insisted in having like reading groups and talks and workshops as a way like to engage with the community. It's like acknowledging that yeah, oftentimes the party is seen as like this place of ecstasy and wildness, but it's also a place where a lot of people that are troubled and traumatized go to just deplete their energies. And yeah, it's like, I think it is also, I think we see as part of our work and responsibility, how can we bring like, or how can we share resources, not only inside of the party, but also outside.
Which is, I think, what makes this work also political. I think the question of whether these parties, particularly parties that are influenced by queer feminist values, are political is a very interesting one, because we're not doing, you know, traditional activist work, but in a way, by virtue of not just building a dance floor, but weaving a community around the dance floor, and having that community informed by principles of mutual aid, you know, supporting those more vulnerable, those that cannot turn to familial or state support, or building solidarity between people from different experiences with different concerns, but also forging a kind of radical imagination about that involves a critique of how things are and an imagination of how they could be different in all of these senses, even if they're just happening on a micro scale. I think what is happening at the party can be, or around these queer feminist party collectives, can be seen as political, in the sense that they forge social relations that encourage values and modes of cooperation that go against what is possible under the dominant paradigm.
Another element that I think it's also like quite central to many of our parties is how they, yeah, many of them, not all of them, like claim or to be sex positive, and oftentimes there's a lot of buzz about what this should be or what is this, and yeah, for example, with Mina, like, of course there are clubs and parties with dark rooms, but these dark rooms have been yeah, oftentimes places that were destined to only certain types of bodies and identities. And what we wanted to do was like to create a dark room that could welcome maybe, yeah, also femme people, women, people that would not identify as gay men, that feel comfortable maybe like just having sex, anonymous sex in a dark room, also to experiment in a party. You know, a party is also a place where you get to meet a lot of friends and partners and lovers. So yeah, for us it was important like to introduce. It didn't matter so much at the beginning if people would use it or not.
Yeah, even just to be welcome in that space, not to be seen as an intruder.
Yeah.
Because of their body, because I guess that's part of the limitation of the traditional gay darkroom or gay cruising, because understandably it's starts from a history of like being very protective of like a persecuted possibility of pleasure. So like the safe corner that we find for our pleasure, we need to be very protective of it, but like then it develops into a culture of like anyone else with a different body, man or woman, walks into this space and is suddenly seen as a threat or as an intruder. And I think, I don't know, in different ways, like both Lecken and Dump started as an intervention in traditional gay darkroom spaces. I think Dump started in Samver-Schöneberg, then moved to Ficken 3000, and Lecken started in Ficken 3000, as far as I remember, and like they both started trying to find new ways of like negotiating this space in terms of like presence, safety, consent, pleasure, and like all the things that come along with trying to engage with public sex in a party space.
Yeah, I feel like there was like a massive shift because before we had these like more queer feminist dark rooms, like most of the nights at Ficken were explicitly for gay men. And it meant if you wanted to hook up with someone, you had to take a stranger back to your house or decide if you go back to their house. And this then kind of like merging of the gay dark rooms and these more queer dark rooms was kind of like quite a fun, playful space because we have different relationships to consent and we have to kind of like start conversations about how do you make it work. And it was kind of like, I feel like the dance floor offers like a really playful space where you figure stuff out and you experiment. And then now, like in a club, if there's no dark room in the space, we build one. And it's also kind of like another space that is kind of like open to this like playful messing around, trying to figure things out kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and here in Berlin, it's also like the paradigm is so different. I mean, when I first came to Berlin, like for me it was like, yeah, groundbreaking because in Lisbon we were still like struggling just with non-gender toilets, you know, which are deemed illegal. I think like even here they're deemed illegal, but for some reason, like clubs seem to be okay with it. But in Lisbon, that was like one of the biggest battles, just like that we were not allowed to have non-gender toilets for some reason. I mean, I guess there's always like I don't even know, it's like, I guess also operating under the fear that, you know, the straight predator will go into the women's toilet, but completely disconsidering all sorts of other identities and sexualities that inhabit the club. And again, like seeing the participants of, or the people that go into a club as enemies or dangerous people that you need to, you know, control with force, be it with a sign or with just police-like security. And yeah, and I think another thing, and I think also Lecken is also fairly implicated is with urban politics, like how parties also tend to be places where we rehearse like political organization with groups. In Lisbon, at least, like for us, it was always so difficult. Like I think because also Mina was born in the middle of a boom, of a touristic boom in Lisbon. There was a big excitement about the city. There was a lot of touristic development happening, and the party was gaining some traction, but at the same time we kept just being expelled, having events canceled, being pushed further and further outside of the city. And I think what was interesting was also to see how so many people that were coming to the party that maybe previously would not be implicated with this sort of politics started becoming vocal about their rights in public space and their rights in the city, which were also fairly threatened now here in Berlin, you know, with the arrival with all these tech giants, be it Amazon or Google.
I think, I mean, my personal wish is to see more politics in electronic dance music, cosmology, also because this is a form of, pleasure or leisure that is attracting the attention of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of young people all across the world. But the bulk of the political work that is being done in this sphere is done by queer feminist collectives all over the world. And in a way, the kind of political work that we do is mostly giving voice, representation, and opportunity to marginalized and underrepresented groups. This is kind of the first impetus or the first urgency that this political work comes from, and then building on that, building work of mutual aid and solidarity, and imagining alternatives. But the work of building communities or care work or social reproduction work, however you want to call it, has always been traditionally the work of women and artists and queer femme people. And it would be wonderful to see if more, more communities within the electronic dance music also understood making parties as making community, or making social relations, or making politics, as opposed to just thinking that a sick party is a sick lineup and a fat sound system, which obviously can be a part of it. But I feel like electronic dance music, and also the kind of sex politics and drug politics and the pleasure politics that can all be housed under this rubric, has the potential to politicize and radicalize young people in the way that we haven't really seen since punk, the days of punk.
Yeah, and I think to an extent, I mean, if I dare to say, like, queer feminist parties feel definitely more politically engaged. I mean, oftentimes we would even be criticized of using like politics as some sort of like maquillage, like to attract people, as if, oftentimes, the straight male loner that wants to run a party would not understand that the party was not using politics just as an aesthetic flag, but it's because these are people that are really talking about their urgencies and needs and desires that are oftentimes unheard. And that's also what drives us, like, to become organized and to not rely so much on the state or on other elements that privilege some of our others. And I think this self-organization and drive that already exists among queer feminist parties was also felt with the arrival of the pandemic, because we are talking about our collectives and parties and clubs, but last year everything shut down, and a lot of these communities were left without a house, without a place where they could meet and encounter and socialize and also organize and conspire on a regular basis. And it was interesting to see that a lot of these communities were left very vulnerable. I mean, everyone was left very vulnerable amidst the pandemic. But I feel like a lot of people within our community are particularly vulnerable. They don't have maybe family support. Maybe they don't have also a lot of these people work in nightlife or depend on these projects also to meet their financial needs. But at the same time, it was also like amidst like this collectives that a lot of emergency responses were born. Like there is already also a tradition of solidarity and mutual aid. And one example could be like the Berlin collective action that I don't know, when did it appear, like 2 weeks after, I think. In 2 weeks, a bunch of collectives managed to create like a legal structure that could collect funds to distribute among nightlife workers and performers. That all of a sudden,
people living in camps and sex workers, also street sex workers.
Exactly, and because all of us live in Berlin, and some of us had the luck of receiving state support. I feel like a lot of that money ended up going to the people that didn't get that support. People that don't declare or don't have invoices, or paperless people, or Yeah, and for me that was like pretty amazing to see how there was like immediately a response, you know, even amidst chaos and the apocalypse, there was already a structure in place. Yeah, and I think that's also why we're here together, because we're also, yeah, dynamized or initiated some projects within our community that the main drive was like to keep, you know, gathering in a way, you know, to keep the dance alive, to keep sharing resources, and we had to kind of like rethink how do we do it outside of the clubs, outside of the parties. Maybe Heather, I don't know if you would like to start to talk about the rave fitness that we all attended.
Rave Fitness is like a fitness class that we started a while ago, but then in the pandemic it became one of the tools, along with other like different classes, that was really useful once the clubs closed. It's a fitness class that we initially we were doing every Tuesday and Thursday, and basically we play this like really high tempo, like 160 BPM, like UK rave music, and then do shadow boxing, so like really basic sequences where you do like punching and kicking over and over again, and the sequences are really repetitive, so you kind of just like keep moving and you get into a trance. And I think like I enjoy it because it's kind of like a really nice, it's an enjoyable way to like let out like aggression and frustration. And before the pandemic, it was also a way that we come together and we listen to music. We listen to a set together, and then we just like punch and kick as hard as you can, and you get this endorphin hit from the exercise, and it's like a feel good. I think it's not really about fitness because we take a lot of the videos from YouTube, like a lot of the sequences are made up, so it's kind of like it's kind of like a made up sport, so it has this ridiculousness to it as well. And then suddenly when the clubs closed and we were told that we weren't allowed to gather, like I think our communities are not based in like couples where everybody can just go home to their like couple or like small unit, because we're a big collective and we tend to hang out in very big groups. There was this like I felt like there was this panic of like, how do we come together and how do you see everybody? Like I don't want to sit opposite someone and have a coffee. I need to feel like I'm together with these bodies that I usually meet in a club and I get this hit from. So then initially at the beginning of the pandemic, we started to meet every day on Zoom or on like other various platforms. Now we're going to start using Queer House. And we just met every day and we did a fitness class online. And then DJs started to offer, because everybody had nothing to do, like all of a sudden like our entire schedules were cancelled. So then DJs started to offer to do live streams. So then we had the live music like slowly came into the fitness, which was really nice. And then when the rules changed and we were allowed to gather in like first in groups of 20 to do sport outside, it was just like everybody got really excited and we got chipped together and got a sound system, and then had to scope out like places that we could meet without disrupting people too much with the music. So it kind of like kept rolling, and now we're back online again. So it's kind of like, I think there were other classes as well, like our friend Austin Fagan also did pop dance, and now other people are organizing things. So it's like one of many ways that we kind of like responded to find a way to like keep moving together. I'm gonna show a video. And the video is just random video, like it's a collection of random videos that my friends have taken, that people have taken of the class, just to give you an idea of like what it looks like and what the vibe is. And I want to stream this like directly. Oh no, this goes this way.
This one is dedicated to all the ravers in the nation.
that I run things.
There was like also like maybe like a last thing, there are a few shots of Killer DJ in there, because like at some point when it got too cold to meet outside, then Crack Belmar, a bar in Friedrichshain, invited us to do it there. So for a couple of months we could have DJs with like small groups of people come and do fitness in bars, which I think was like just a nice moment, because before the lockdown we'd always been in these underground spaces and we hadn't been very visible. And then because of we had to start doing everything outside, we suddenly had this visibility that we hadn't had before. And we also had to think about space in a different way, because the task became constantly searching for a space you could do stuff where you didn't make too much noise. And I think out of this process then we started to like be in contact with other groups and other collectives, and people started to offer the spaces that were available, which I think was like a nice element to this process.
Yeah, and it's nice, like, I mean, it's nice to see the video, but also nice to see how the project like keeps like, yeah, also like kind of like generating some energy within the community, you know, like asking like to DJs like to kind of like commissioning like DJ sets to do this exercise, asking like people around like also to help you out, like to give the class. And also the other thing is the streaming, like we get to see that first it started with streaming with the first hard lockdown. Then we went outdoors and now it's again like online. And one of the projects that we're part of is the Queer House, that is an alternative platform, social media, that also came somehow. I mean, it was born before the pandemic, but I feel like during the pandemic, people became more wary of the necessity to challenge also this dependency on the big tech platforms, be it with the scandals of Zoom and Facebook and Amazon making a shit ton amount of money while everyone was struggling financially. So with Queer House, we wanted to, it's an operating platform. We want to kind of also see if we find ways to kind of like cut these ties with all these other platforms that also became a bit our working tools, you know, that, you know, where artists share their work, where the collectives share their events and share also where we organize, you know, like organize for a demonstration or for a project. And ultimately, these are not safe spaces. These are, you know, platforms that also thrive and make money out of mining and extracting private data. And yeah, I feel like Queer House has a bunch of, you know, queer hackers that are, you know, pretty savvy and also set together a bunch of servers for the website so we could have the Queer House platform running, but then the servers would also host some of the streams for the Ray Fitness and also for the Lecken Reading Group. So yeah, it's like nice to see how the community is kind of like resourceful and just kind of like creates ways to make things happen, and, you know, going against also these dependencies now that we have also some time in hands to invest in these tools and ultimately also to regain some agency. It's not just about thinking of freedom inside of clubs, but also of other spaces that we inhabit, such as the digital space. And with Queer House, we've been running. It's running on open source software, so it's free, and also all the work has been volunteer work. But ultimately, we would like also to start generating some revenues, so we can pay coders, so we can pay designers, so we can pay all the people that invest time and labor in the platform, and also to pay the servers. And for that reason, we have a transparent funding platform where people, or donation platform where people can donate and also learn more about Queer House.
This
and
is
we're
to go directly on the stream.
Yeah, I hope people can see it at home. And we're also going to do an event with her, the Berlin-based radio, which also saw some of their streams muted on Facebook. Facebook also, due to intellectual rights problems, like they ended up like starting to mute a lot of the DJ sets. The same with Twitch, which I think is hosted by Amazon. So it's nice to see how there is a certain drive like for creating alternative and go against like this culture of dominance, not just inside of the clubs, but also now these new spaces that we inhabit. And like Queer House, there's other projects such as Fuck Off Google and Berlin versus Amazon. And I think we should all check also those projects. I think we can also talk a bit about the Lecken Reading Group, I think.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short in the interest of time. We've been also running a book club, I guess a bit more vigorously now during lockdown, because we find ourselves at home with a choice between Netflix and books. But the book club has actually existed since the beginning of, as long as the party has been happening, because I guess we felt we still needed to educate ourselves, or we wanted to educate ourselves on a series of topics in order for us to do the work that we wanted to do, like sex-positive feminism. We wanted to read more about queer theory and praxis, the politics of radical sex, DIY raves as a form of political protest. And these are all, like over the years, we've sort of assembled a syllabus with readings for all of these categories and some others, which you can also see on our website, which is lecken.berlin. And I think Heather has also prepared later on a little video, which is just a scroll of this reading list if you want to see the kind of resources, both books and movies that have gone into sort of shaping us, influencing us. And I guess the idea of a book club is well, you know, the precious value of ongoing education as a tool for building commonality. So rather than assuming that just because we dance on the same dance floors and we like going to the same parties doesn't necessarily mean we have the same politics, or just because we follow the same Instagram accounts doesn't mean we have the same analysis of the world. Also because, you know, there's only so much you can distill, even compress, even in the best articulated Instagram banner. So the book club is there to kind of build a common archive of resources for us to return to, but also a common analysis of the world, and possibly also shape common tactics and strategies for shifting power, be it in areas that we have an influence over, or even in areas where we don't, but we still believe in the value of bearing witness or imagining of how things could be organized differently. And at the moment, we are running a small syllabus on anti-racism, anti-fascism, and Black and Brown liberation theory. And I just wanted to mention a couple of resources that we've been reading lately, and also because they kind of lie at the intersection of many of the themes that we're also passionate about and talking about tonight. One of them is Audre Lorde, very recommendable collection of essays, Sister Outsider. It's over there, unfortunately. So I don't know if the camera wants to grab a screen grab. There's some of the books that we've been passionate about lately. And Audre Lorde, for those who don't know her, she is a Black American radical lesbian poet, an author. This collection kind of gathers some of her readings from her essays from the late 70s and 80s. She also lived for a while in Berlin and kickstarted the Afro-Deutsch movement, or was crucial for that movement. And one of the essays in that book, I mean, there's many essays, also some classic ones like The Master's Tools, Don't Destroy the Master's House. But one of the essays that really stuck with us was the uses of the erotic as power, where she is basically arguing that she would like all of the activities that we do and all of our politics and all of our relations to be shaped by the power of eros, which is very importantly not to be confused with the pornographic, but it's basically the striving for aliveness and fullness and satisfaction and joy in everything we do. And you know, once you set up the erotic as a kind of standard for aliveness, standard of quality, if you want, in your life, you can also use it as the opposite to notice when in your life you are being alienated or dominated, when your labor is stolen away from you, when your culture is commodified and co-opted, when your politics is being stifled by anti-democratic forces, when you yourself are feeling numb, disconnected from yourself, alienated from yourself. So it becomes a measure also of oppression and domination. And I think the erotic is important both as a striving, but also in its negative form to develop a critique based around its absence. And it's impossible to think about that without also thinking of Adrienne Marie Brown's bestseller, particularly very well read and appreciated in queer circles, Pleasure Activism, which is a collection of essays that she brought out a couple of years ago, where she's making, and she's also leaning on Audre Lorde, making this argument that we need a politics that centers pleasure, not in its hedonic quality, but a kind of political pleasure. She calls it, I think, pleasure that is good for the species and the planet. So it's a kind of communal pleasure. It's consensual, and it's aspiring toward. I mean, you can also understand it as a kind of rejection of capitalist austerity, a system that tells you that you always have to defer or sacrifice your pleasure because there's not enough material resources and there's not enough time in the world. Or you can understand it as a move against fascism that is telling you, a kind of political ideology that's based on the racism of the other's pleasure, the other that has more sex, that has, that doesn't work that much, that breaks the rules and skips the queue. But it can also, this politics or activism of pleasure can also be a corrective to the kinds of more rigid radicalism that we've seen on the left, which, all due respect, but a lot of, I'm quite fatigued to see political programs, even by the most inspiring figures like Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, centered around the needs of hard-working, heteronormative nuclear families. And it seems like at some point like a continuation of more of the same, but with slightly better social protection. So I think what we are you know, if you want to see what we're doing as political work, is also to say that pleasure is political, but also that we would like to see this pleasure activism pushed more front and center to, or you know, this kind of communal, consensual, planetary, or planet-conscious pleasure, for it to be included more intentionally as part of the radical political projects that we want to support. And I know this has also been, these two texts have been also very inspirational for you and your work on the techno-drift.
Yeah, and also where you were talking, I actually had a thought about the activism part. And again, this the importance of reclaiming. So if we want to use pleasure, if we want to use joy as forces, it's somehow we have to battle against the what consumerism and capitalism and oppression has made of these words somehow. So relegating them into a special place of after work, you know, if even there. And also maybe pleasure, I guess a lot of first association is like indulgence or self-indulgence or self-gratification to somehow recover from the, you know, most of life, engage in like some sort of productivity to hold up a power that most people don't even have the time to understand how it operates on them. So it's and noticing, so it's not, it's active. It's not like a pleasure that you consume and feel good. There is that part, definitely, and it's like in the book it's like all different realms of life. But also there is like an active noticing, as you said, as when it's not there. And that's when rage and anger, you know, like come in useful, not as reactive forces, but as like rightful places to claim what, where aliveness is. So it's a very different vibe, because if you're indulgent and like, oh, pleasure is like some Roman bacchanalia only, you don't have the awakeness to notice when it's not there, and you don't know how to fight. So you gotta have a little bit of resilience and tone to engage. So this reclaiming also of joyfulness, of joy as a world making and somehow what can prepare the ground for politics. And I feel that, again, dancing might not be political per se, though in, you know, the contemporary dance world, which is very intellectual and very expanded in its understanding of what even dance is, you know, it's very inclusive. Noticing like the revolutionary power of body and like thinking of system otherwise and narration and of what this system is made of and is included with, and intuiting this revolutionary power, but often being somehow only at a theoretical level, engaged with it and being very depoliticized, and at the same time, often activism or politics being completely disembodied. So then there is a bridge maybe there to make somehow. But in terms of reclaiming and joyfulness, I can talk a bit about the techno-drift. But just, so another, I mean, this question around joyfulness is brought up by a book that we bring up also at Tanz Congress and other places. It's Barbara Ehrenreich, Dancing in the Streets, A History of Collective Joy, that I first saw on Keith Hennessy bookshelf when I was staying at his house in San Francisco. I was like, okay, these San Franciscans taught me a lot about self-organizing and like keeping things alive through reaching out and acts of solidarity, partly because there is no welfare state and there is no like funded art or anything like that, and this huge legacy of radicals there. But anyway, so Ehrenreich talks about these lost techniques of ecstasy or technologies of ecstasy, and dancing to music seems to be like one of them. And she asks why Western civilization took so much care of not forgetting about them, but systematically oppressing these occasions for self-love, loss, and ecstasy and joyfulness. And what do they enable? And if they are not there, what's lost? And yeah, so dancing has this ability to deatomize, like moving together in a rhythm, makes us, I mean, we have this ability, this built-in ability to fall into rhythm as human bodies, human beings. And this somehow allows us to create a we consciousness. It's like we have a built-in ability to be on ecstasy, basically, if we move on the same rhythm at the same time. So there is something about repetition that brings up this like joyfulness. So the techno drift is has been used as a medicine. It was my own practice, and then was voluntarily spread through the community through this spell that I wrote, through friends who initiated. Mariano was very active in that, DJs who wanted to make music for it. And so we passed it on and kind of like analog, so in person, transmitted it and enabled people to use it and spread it further. And it was intended as like a medicine, so a place where people could recover this sense of we, this expansion that takes a lot of anxiety and depression away, because you join into a sense of self that is wider than your own neurosis or personality. And so the video we're watching goes from the 1st of March to the 31st of December. So you see the birds, you see 4 season change. There you are, Pedro, doing your dance under the, and I think the flowers come, the cherry blossom, there it is. So you see 4 season change. It goes all the way to the 31st of December with snowsuits. It's still happening. Yeah, it's a free resource. In this sense, like choreography for me became not so much the organizer, like putting together of steps, or like but more like I start to understand it as a organizing energies. So that's Heather laughing. And so we press play together, we gather and we walk on a beat. And sometimes we stop and dance. So this was somewhat legal because it hacks the problem of Corona, which is you cannot be in place in a group. But if you move, police was very happy even with us. So besides the last days. So if you do it now, be in smaller groups and keep distance. So in the moment we heard the beat and we were able to be together again, there was a sense of like loss and a sense of, I mean, both happiness and also deep grief and fear that this would not come back. But also dancing and club dancing, partly because of what I said before about this lost legacy of joyfulness. Dancing in clubs and dancing together in the West, at least, in this state of oppression and lack of pleasure, is very strongly linked with mourning. So it's a state of grieving. I cannot detangle it. So partly because the margins have kept the vibe alive, queers, slaves, peasants, low-class people, witches, and so every time we step in a collective or in a club, in a place of joyfulness, I feel that there is also some sort of like automatic, humble honoring to the ground we are dancing on. So there is these two forces together. Last, like, to tie it back to this idea of resilience, it got mentioned as like resilience in a way once is different than survival. So this has been somewhat a survival strategy, but for some people who've been, and for the people also witnessing it, seeing this like moment of, yes, I want to feel good, I'm entitled, I have the right to feel good and be together and breathe. It's like, it's the ability to together create some spaciousness around that allows us to feel somehow belonging and safety and connection. And again, dancing cannot solve all the problems in the world, but definitely is a technology, specifically when that happens, we horizontalize, so we feel more safe, so we have more trust, so we can negotiate better, so we can have better conflicts to create agency to eventually live in a... That was Mariana dancing. Yeah. Yeah, being able to be together otherwise and democratically or with agency and so on. So. I also have to say, like here we are in Essen. I had a stipendium for the whole year. And that allowed me to be very generous with my time. And so it's like, maybe we can talk after about the power of like a universal basic income and what the role of artists can be and what allows us to generate and give energy around somehow, yeah. Besides the gig economy, the difference a bit. Yeah. I think there is a part with music now.
Yeah.
It's coming.
It's the next part.
Sophie.
Ah non, ça...
Yeah, there's maybe I will maybe just add one thing around dance as a practice. Is a form of misbehavior. So what you said also before about the rave fitness is like, if we move always the same muscles, we always have the same thoughts. So to cultivate a radical imagination, you need to move in ways that are unruly. And the same thing with the fitness is not so much about, yeah, again, like turning the body into a machine and feel good for, looks good. But it's like this feeling aspect and this unruly that you don't know if it's right aspect is what activates the joy part. And also because we are for each other and with each other. It's a very different than a frontal, executed, thing to manage your body. It's not about managing the body. What you say about like exhausting energy or doing it wrong and participate, that's the joy bringer and the agency builder. Yeah.
It's like a way to process, isn't it? Which
Yeah.
is like what's sort of been taken away this year is like you experience things, you talk, you read books, and like I feel like the body is like then you figure it out unconsciously somewhere through this like.
Yeah. Digestion also. Yeah. Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, and it kept us alive for a lot of like grim moments. I mean, we've been talking about these projects and also, I mean, how we would organize before, how we were celebrating and how we managed to keep celebrating but also mourning, and how this sort of like ties to, as you were saying, as a form of like resilience that kind of like runs through our practices. But I guess maybe one last question that remains to answer or to imagine would be, how do we see this going forward? What would lie ahead of us? Where would we like these energies to kind of lead us to? I think we've been, kind of like conspiring some future projects, and now they could end up, materialize. I don't know if anyone wants to share.
I mean, sorry, as a gossip, but wondering if there is a place for gathering. The club could be, but also realizing that it's not just about the experience of partying and clubbing, but there are many other things that we can do together, that people can do together, that can contribute to some sort of like public health type of scenario, in the sense of where do you go to feel resilience? One way is to do individual therapy, but there is an aspect of collective healing and together and understanding and debating that, so we were fantasizing about a social center of sort, and on my side I had more the fantasy that like, I think theater and programmers are also very interested in this aspect of communality, but they're caught between the new now, which is like this network forming and gathering, with the paradigm of representation and production. And it's very hard to give funding and distribute space for projects that are not somehow pieces. And I trust that there is like a change, but it's not there yet. So my dream is that like a club that is unused during the week, and they have a lot of rooms, theaters have a lot of back rooms, understanding how to loosen up the space to make it for collective use of sort, whether if it is for book clubs, for a kitchen soup, for like a knitting corner, for a place where you go and you're silent, but you can be near other silent people, for mindfulness and so on and so on. So
because something that I think was lost with the pandemic for a lot of people in our community and created a lot of also mental health crisis was the isolation that came from not having an externally structured social situation to go to and be social and reach your community.
Like a place.
Like a place,
yeah.
or something like an event that organized, like the Ray Fitness or like the Drift. Because I feel like same with traditional heteronormative families, but also with chosen families, however we define the term. The thing is, suddenly all the strain was put on interpersonal relationships, and either relationships don't survive this much strain, or there is a form of isolation that cannot be broken just by direct interpersonal relationship outside of a community. And for example, I think many people who party or like go to clubs is not because they're a social butterfly. Like many of us are socially anxious or socially dysfunctional, and like a space that is like you show up to regardless of like having a commitment to another human being in particular makes it possible to engage and open up and find ways to imagine togetherness following that. And I think this is something that like a lot of ideas came up, like how to replace that thing that was missing so urgently to break that isolation that comes in the absence of the club, and like realizing that it's not necessarily only the party that can provide that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we realized in the last year is like the club is actually not so central, but it was one of the spaces we had access to. So all this focus was on like specifically the party and the club, because this was like a space that we could access because Germany like benefits from clubbing, so they like allow it and give it funding. But it's like a space you can access, and you can also mess it up and be experiment, and nobody's like checking your funding application that you followed through, you know, like it's like it would be amazing if that could be expanded to like weekday activities and not just be on like a Friday night access basis.
I mean, there has been many projects that also have tried to do that very successfully. Like I can think of Raumerweiterungshalle, which was a queer collective with a tiny space, which basically provided the platform for a community to come together for many different forms of activities. And it's still going strong, and like it's provided an anchor for a community that is also very open-ended over the years to like, yeah, I mean, be resilient in the way you're defining the term, or just like be alive and be create their own world in a way that is fulfilling.
Yeah.
And for me, this year or last year has sort of been a teacher. It's shown us, it's shown me how powerful we are, and how, I feel like we've grown a lot in terms of our bonds and the way in which we've been able to stretch time and attention and resources and care to each other. Obviously, we're all part of the same community, and I also don't want to either glorify this community or assume that everybody's experienced the last year the same. On the contrary, I fear that we are actually part of a lucky community, and my wish would be that, or my hope would be that more people have had the chance to also experience 2020 and the cancellation of the dance floor as also something potentially positive in their lives. And it would be, but another thing that we've learned, which is that all of this time we've been thinking at the party, you know, because our parties barely make money, so we've always been doing community work and care work and awareness work and the work of educating ourselves and, you know, for crumbs, basically. And strangely enough, 2020 was the year where we've actually been quite, at least in the second half, all of these easy grants and, you know, these other forms of state support, at least for, you know, registered freelance artists started coming in. I mean, we do live in the center of capitalist profitability, which is Germany, which is also hugely the result of very problematic, unequal global relation. But it's sort of created this perverse relation where on one hand, we're sort of tapping into the universal basic income that we've always asked for, and we're finally being rewarded for this feminist work of social reproduction that we're doing. But we're not quite able to do our work. And this is also a nice reminder to all of these UBI haters who are thinking that people are just gonna kind of sink into the potato couch. This year is actually proving that people want both. They want a guaranteed income, and they want to be doing the work that they feel passionate about. And maybe just one last point, that what last year also taught us, and this is a sad lesson, I think, was the eviction of Liebig 34, which was the second to last squat in Berlin. And I feel like the message that the city and that the federal government is sending is that there is no more space in this country to do anything, to take over any kind of urban or physical space that is not run either on the profit motive or under the under the rubric of state funding. You can only kind of dance to these two gods, but the idea that you could seize over space and organize, voluntarily organized kind of mutual aid activity outside of capital and the state is not possible. And this is hugely problematic because it means that there is no dissent. There is no possibility for dissent outside of these institutions. And I would imagine that the social center of our dreams would be, you know, no fees, free access, community run, but also we don't have to worry about rent, and the people who work there also don't need to charge fees because they are being otherwise taken care of.
Yeah, and these are things that are disappearing. I mean, even in Lisbon, when Rabbit Hole started, I realized how lucky we were, because it was also kind of like in a phase where there were still like, there were even some squats going on in the city, which there are not anymore that we know of. And the party was actually born in a LGBT social center, and eventually it moved to a gallery space that a bit like you were saying, also came from that tradition of like experimenting with space, and they started also a bit of as a squat, and all of a sudden they were granted with this space where they were not paying rent, and they got like state funds, and this was also what allowed us like to start events that were also free entrance, and we would start during the afternoon, and we would have film screenings, and we would have food, and we would have talks, and we would invite teachers, and yeah, it felt more of like a social center that was really missing for a lot of us. And eventually, as things kind of like evolved, we were kind of also bound to the need of like making money, and all of a sudden the party that was just, you know, making a little bit of money to feed all these other activities became also central and quite demanding, because things became really expensive, and all of a sudden people that actually had some time started having to work 2 jobs because they could not pay their rents. And I fear that this is happening not only in Lisbon, but also happening in Berlin, that is becoming, you know, a tech metropolis, and I wonder where are we going to be at once we emerge from the situation. But yeah, we have, I guess, the energy.
I will teach yoga online for 85 euros an hour for the new tech industry for corporate team building. A lot of money and pay for the community center. I don't know, but it's also, I feel that there is like a consciousness rising and an exhaustion around like this gig economy and productivity, like artists touring. Oh, I have to go and travel and take this gig, and so this kind of hyper-professionalization of everything we do, and it doesn't make any sense, and people know, and I think they've touched it during pandemic. I personally find this model about like, yeah, sometimes you want to make a work of art, but not all the time, not every year, not every 2 minutes, not, you know. And this like, through Pact Solferein, I got this stipendium, basically, this test for basic income. And it's interesting how much it was able to generate, because a lot of artists have practices they want to share, or secret passions, like whatever is your, you know, if it's a book club or like a playing music, and you become really generous and you start to offer somehow, because you're not into this mono view of productivity, and so wondering where is the breaking point there.
Yeah, I guess
that service, you know, that artists and culture producers and so on see themselves as like, yeah, like as in service of, you know, so.
Yeah, and I guess we, like, over the past year, we've proven ourselves to be some sort of, I mean, as we were joking, saying that we are a mobile, like, queer community center. We're just missing a space, like, at this moment. And I guess this is what we want to kind of, like, close on this note. Like, we kind of want to ask, like, clubs and art institutions to kind of also be more sensitive with the people that, yeah.
To create also continuity, because it's continuity that creates community and you create change. Otherwise it becomes all an event and having ideas about things could change. But there is something about like going by that builds, is like an avalanche, it just sticks. And you need some sort of place, at least for some time.
Yeah, it's very important to have a storefront and to take over street level space.
Yeah.
It's symbolic, but also very practical.
Yeah. Wow.
Should we conclude? Thank you so much.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you, Mateusz, for the invitation. Thank you to all the team from Tanztage And thank you to Sophiensaelle and all the team. Also, thank you to Mariana. Thank you to Lou Drago that has also been following some of our gatherings. Now we will have a bit of a break and we'll proceed into
5 minutes.
Yeah,
5
5 minutes
minutes,
break, and then we'll proceed into the infinity rug, and
Yeah.
Maria will
I
honor
will.
us
I
with
will
a-
give a body scan to get into the body, so we can chill on the rug. And so, if you reset, get your lovers and drinks and
light some candles.
yeah,
Get the rugs.
get a rug. Get
Get
a
the
rug.
rugs.
If you haven't yet, get a rug. Get a rug.
Thank you.
Okay, 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Are we ready now?
think so. I think they're coming. I think they're also coming up. Okay. Great. Yeah. So I will move your attention for 10 minutes, if you're willing. And then we slide into the beautiful sound offer from Pedro and Ruthbeth. So you want to lay your body down like a fabric or like a river, or like a spread of cards. On the side, on the back, you can support the back of your knees or your arms or your head. And then you close your eyes, join the darkness. And if you can raise the fingers like antennas, rising up the arms, breathing, ballooning the lungs, and exhaling, let the hand waterfall down, landing on your body. We just take a moment to be the holder and the held. Feeling the body breathing underneath your hands and arms. The body breathing itself beyond your will. You can follow the inhale, breath touching the nostrils or the mouth, the back of the throat, moving the rib cage, moving the diaphragm, massaging your intestines, and then all the way back out, changed, warmer. Dissolving, sinking into gravity, falling into the rug falling into the floor falling into the floor below it, the floor falling into the earth, falling, falling, falling. Feel how every cell in the body knows where down is. And we move the attention to the whole skin suit. the whole, this one continuous organ that is the skin. The interface, like the breath, the messenger between outside and inside, or what seems to be outside and what feels like inside. The skin is like a tapestry of sensations. You can take tiny movement, like creating a luminescence in the body through increasing a little bit of pressure or feeling the touch of your clothes, if you have any. You can take small movements to dance, this small dance of sensations, of temperature, cold or warm, places of numbness, places of density, forgotten places, like the edge of your pinky toes, the back of your knee, the back of your ears, the armpits. A small dance, like a fabric. The skin also faces inward. There is all that landscape of layers, the whole content of the body, fascia, fat, muscles, the electricity of nerves, the organs, intestine, genitals, kidneys, stomach, pancreas, liver, lungs, heart, brain, the whole content, blood, food, thoughts, tears, snot, saliva, memories. And rest the movement and bring your attention to the headspace. Resting the back of the head against the rug. Bring your attention to your eye sockets. These wide, hollow circles falling into the headspace in the shape of two cones, carving deep into the headspace, softening. Softening the eyes, feel their watery quality. Floating like boats on a lake, softening. Softening the space between the eyebrows and the forehead. And as if you would be walking along the bones of your eyebrows, slide, melt down to the temple bones, and allow your jaw to unhinge, sliding down the jaw bones all the way to the chin. Allow your mouth to be slightly open, softening. Allowing the face the mask to melt. Entering the cave of the mouth. That is a little open, so you feel the draft of air moving in, touching the walls of your cheeks and your palate. Softening the teeth, the gums, the lower palate, the upper palate. Softening the space between the molars and the very back. Allowing the jaw to hang. We find the tongue, this big, wet, sleepy monster resting inside the cave of the mouth. And with very, very, very small movements, like the movements you have when you sleep, allow your tongue to move a little bit, to wake up a little bit, and have a secret tongue dance in your mouth, allowing the tongue to move, searching for different textures and temperatures, slidey, some flavors, searching the mouth with the tongue. Very slowly. As you do this, soften the tube that goes from your mouth to your anus. Soften your eyes and the back of your head. And rest the tongue. We bring the attention to the ears. And we roll, rocking the head ever so slightly to one side and the other, pouring from one ear, rolling back, pouring out of another ear. You can think of your ears as conch shells, softening, spiraling, softening, tender ears, like baby's ears. They can hear everything. Or spiral nebulas, galaxies. Feel the sound touching. Sound is touch. And you can keep rolling your head or not. You can have subtle movements in your body. Bring this whole pleasure of texture, of flavors, sniffing the air, the smell, the touch of sound, the watery eyes, the soft brain. All of it is a festival of sensations. And allow the whole body to become a big ear, touched by sound, a vibratory field more than an assembled piece made of parts. A vibratory field being touched by sound and gravity and breath. relaxing in a soft state of rave.
rave, I can watch myself, watching the world melt down and build itself up again. Does this world build itself up again in the same way every time? Will I one day be taken through a wormhole into a glitch in the matrix? A parallel universe where there is milk and honey and social welfare and basic income for everyone? And there is so much fucking love and so much fucking despair being rendered and spun together and touched and sweated out. All that excess love and that excess despair that doesn't find its place in the world of people because it is just too much. It is so much that it cannot be contained. It will not be contained. It needs to get out. Out. To get out, where does it go to? Where is it flowing into? It must be flowing somewhere. When will the wormhole take us to the glitch in the matrix? That parallel universe where there is milk and honey and social welfare and basic income for everyone. Although it may lead to a form of ecstasy, where the excess energy, love, laughter, despair, and tears contained within our systems may be released and shared, to be in a state of rave is not equivalent to being in a state of ecstasy. To rave also means to support and call something forth, to engage with the dancing body in order to propel and support ideas and ideals with madness and enthusiasm. As an author, I aim herefrom to keep working from a state of rave, looking at the state and the dance floor as sites for rituals of passage, cleansing, confusion, and transformation to be devised, offered, and shared, upheld and supported by the stomps of feet dancing to techno beats.
the space long lost in physical reality. One day, words from a poet will become clear. The music of language will still ring. Don't give up on yourself by giving up the fight. Don't cry all over yourself if you haven't fought.